Yep. Good evening, everyone. So, last session we started discussing about class component related basics. As I already told you before, understanding class components, we need to understand about JavaScript classes. We need to know about class related some basic. Already we discussed a few points. What we learned is class declaration, class expression, and class members. In class members, we learned about properties, property, and accessors. These points we learned. So we can have property and we can have an accessor. And already I given one example. Accessor purpose is to control read and write operations on property. We can control read write operation on property. And properties are mutable. I given some questions I told you why variables are not allowed in a class. So variables are allowed in a class but not as class member. Class member can be only property or a accessor or a method or a constructor, right? So you learned about property. Next, property and accessors I explained. Now we will see another one, methods. Methods. So actually a method defines actions to perform. What actions to perform you can define by using method. And here the key point is generally actions earlier we used to write by using function. By using a function, we can write the functionality. But the functions are not allowed as class members. Same concept. Just like variables, functions are also not allowed as class member because functions are immutable. So methods are mutable. Actually, in computer programming, we have three basic concepts. We have a function, we have a method, and we have a concept called procedure. We have three basic things: the function, the method, and procedure. What is difference? Technically, we have difference between these three. Function means it is intended to always return a value. Function always have to return a value. Method is always void. It is always void. Procedure can change according to situation. It may return a value, it can be void. Actually, we don't have procedures in every language. I hope you have seen procedures in languages like SQL. Structured query language, you have stored procedures. Have you heard? Stored procedure. Why they are called stored procedures? Procedure is just like a method. Then why it is called as a procedure? Because, for example, you are writing some logic like you are writing like some procedure, and this procedure is having some select star from table, something like this. So what is the result of this procedure? If there are no records in table, what it will return? If there are no records in the table, then what it will return? Will it return null? Will it return null? No, it will become simply void. If there are records, then it will return the records. That means it is behaving as a function, as a method. Then we call them as what? Procedures. Methods always void type and functions always return. But in JavaScript, that doesn't justify. Why? Because in JavaScript, function can be void or method can be with return. It doesn't matter. JavaScript functions and methods have both behaviors. But in technical terms, what is difference between a function, method and procedure is this. Function always returns a value, method always void, and procedure may or may not return the value depending on situation. So here in JavaScript, method can return a value or it can be void. So what is the point is, so class will not allow function as class member. Class will not allow function as class member. Function is immutable. Function is immutable. The actions in class are defined by using method. Actions in class are defined by using method. Are defined by using method. Actions in class are defined by using method. And syntactically, in a class, you can have a method in this way. So method can be void or can return a value. Method can be void or can return a value. So it is similar to a function. It is similar to a function with functional features like, what are the functional features like closure, parameters, spread and rest. All functional related features what you have, they are same. Closure, parameters, spread rest, etc. All there will work same. So no need to give much examples about that. So just we have a function. And here let's open our project. Right. So I am adding some file here. Yeah. In this, we are configuring just some class. So we are having a class, some class name, and it is having some members. So we have name, it is a property, and we have price, it is a number. So we have quantity, that is number, and we have total. Total is a method. Methods are defined directly like this. We don't have any access modifiers or anything else. Later you will learn about TypeScript. In TypeScript, some changes are there. So now in JavaScript, just method name, and it can return this dot quantity into this dot price. Method can return, or method, this is another method which can be simply void type, document dot write. So name, it will get this dot name, and we have price, and that is this dot price, and we have quantity, so this dot quantity, and we have total, that is this dot total. We are just accessing all this. Now we create an object for that product class, and through that we can access the print, so which is going to print all the details. So we have two options. We have some properties and we have method. So we have a property and method. So we are having the property and method, and it is displaying all the data. Generally, the properties and the methods are mutable. So can we have a function in class? You cannot have a function in class. So function F1, it is not allowed in class. As class member, you cannot have. But you can have a function inside class in another method you can have. That means functionality can be defined using function or a method. Functions are not directly allowed as class members because they are immutable. So methods are allowed because they are mutable, and method can be with return, it can be void. It can return or it can be void. So this is nothing much detail to go into this. This is enough to understand. That means how do you configure a method? Method related all rules are same like function. That means parameters, parameterless, first parameter, spread approach, everything is same. Whatever you learned about function, same concept here. So just what is the difference so between this? So what is difference between function and method? That's a basic question always. Function is intended to return a value. Method is always a void type. However, in JavaScript, function and method have similar behavior. Function is immutable and method is mutable. So what is the keynote? Function is not allowed as class member. Function is not allowed as class member. But a class can have function. Same like variable concept here. We can have a function. So function and methods. How do we define a method and a function here? So this is basic about methods. So three important class members are there. That is the accessor and a method. Next important. So we have constructor. These are all JavaScript concepts. These all are JavaScript concepts. So I'm just refreshing all these points so that we can use them in our projects. Because in order to use class components, you should be completely aware of class behavior, class structure, behavior, rules, everything. Now, what is a constructor and what is its role? Generally, what is the purpose of constructor? So many times people have a definition like it is used for initializing values, right? If it is used for initializing values, then it should be called as initializer, right? So you are calling as a constructor. So sometimes people have wrong definition about it. That means usually general programming language learners, they have an idea about constructor in general, like constructor is used for initializing values. That is not good definition. What is the job of constructor is constructor is a special type of subroutine in a class which is responsible for creating an instance for class. An object for class is created by using constructor. Actually, constructor is the name of a software design pattern. It is the name of a software design pattern. So, technically, constructor is a special type of subroutine in class. It is a special type of subroutine in class. It is responsible for instantiation. It is responsible for instantiation. Instantiation is creating object for class. It is responsible for creating an object for class. So it is a special type of subroutine in class. It is responsible for instantiation. So special type of subroutine means it is a special type of method. Special type of subroutine means it is a special type of method and its main job is creating an object for class. If any problem in object creation or if any restriction in object creation, a class is unable to create object. We are having issues with object. Any problem related to object is because of constructor. That means constructor is responsible for creating an object for class. And any problem related to object will be because of constructor. Actually, the word constructor came from a software design pattern. I already given a overview in the beginning. We discussed that software development comprises of different design patterns. We have 23 design patterns. We call them gang of four. And in that, we have three categories: creational, structural, behavioral. Creational patterns deal with object creation mechanism, how an object can be created for a class. So actually constructor is a design pattern. It is a design pattern that defines how an object can be created for class. Constructor is a design pattern that defines how an object can be created for class. An object can be created for class. An object can be created for class. And actually, every class have an implicit constructor. Every class have an implicit constructor. Implicit constructor means a constructor is internally defined. Implicit constructor. If already a class is having implicit constructor, then why you need a constructor? Why you need to define a constructor if already there is a constructor? So already class have a constructor, and what is its purpose? Its purpose is to create an object for class. Then why you need another constructor to create if already it is having a constructor? So at the time of creating object, if you want any additional actions to perform, then you can define them by using a constructor. That means actually, suppose I will give one simple example, like suppose we have application. In application, we are having some actions like insert, update, and delete. Actually, these are three different objects. Insert, update, delete are three different objects. These are actually objects. Insert object, update object, delete object. We have three different objects. What is the job of these objects? The job of these objects to perform certain functionality. That means suppose we are having some database. On that, some actions are performed like inserting, updating, deleting. Then what happen here? Insert object will insert, update object will update, delete object will delete. But before inserting, updating and deleting, we want one action to perform, that is connect. That means what we want is insert object should connect and insert. Update object also should connect and update. Delete object also should connect and delete. So connection is compulsory for every object. Then We can give this work to constructor. We can give this work to constructor. So what will happen if you give this work to constructor? If you give this work to constructor, whenever it is creating an object for insert, at the time of creating object, connection is ready. That means connection will be internally formed. At the time of creating update object, connection is ready. If I give this work to ordinary method, then what will happen? We need to call this every time. Before insert, we have to call connect. Before update, we have to call connect. But if I give this work to constructor, while constructing object itself, it will connect. That means certain actions we want at the time of creating object, we can give those actions to constructor. We can define those actions to constructor. I will show a point here, example. And in JavaScript, actually JavaScript class can have explicit constructor. Define actions that are performed while creating object for class. While creating object for class. So JavaScript constructor is anonymous. Anonymous means it doesn't have a name. It is anonymous and defined with constructor keyword. Generally, in other programming languages and in JavaScript, the job of constructor is little different. Means the behavior. Work is same. It is going to do the same thing. But generally, in other programming languages, class name will be the same name as constructor. Constructor name and class name will be same. Here in JavaScript, constructor don't have name. Constructor will not have a name. It is anonymous and it is defined with constructor keyword. Class and class name, and we have a constructor. We are defining the constructor. JavaScript constructors are anonymous. They don't have name. And it's not like other programming languages. That means here constructor overloading, constructor static, private, these all are not supported. It is just only one constructor. For example, let's see here. I am creating one example. Suppose we have button like insert and update. Okay, two actions are there. And we have a script and a class database. It is having insert method, document.write record inserted. We have delete update method and document.write record updated successfully. Now we are creating a function that is just like database, or say action, db action. Okay. And what we are doing here is we are writing function. We have simple function. One function we can use, or we will use two functions. Suppose we have insert click. So we will create an object for database, and through that object we can access insert. We have update click On update click, we will create an object for database, and through that object, we can access update. These are two actions we are defining. So what we are doing on click, on click, on click, we are using update click. This is insert click, and this is on click. So this is update click. We are having these actions. Now, before inserting updating, I want another functionality called connect. I want another functionality connect. If I give this work a method, that means document.write. First, it should show me connected. After that, it should do insert and update. But this connection work we given to an ordinary method. Then when it will perform? If you given this work to an ordinary method, it will perform only when you call it. That means what we are doing now. I will refresh here. And what we are doing, we click on insert. Then it will say insert. When I click update, it is update. But before inserting updating, we need to connect. That connection is not called. We have to manually call. But we want this to happen automatically for every object. Then what we will do? We will give this work to home constructor. If I give this work to constructor, then what constructor will do? Automatically it will execute for every object. That means constructor is executed automatically for every object. So what is the job of constructor? Not initializing values. Constructor is not for initializing values. Constructor's purpose is to create an object for class. And while creating an object, if you want any functionality to perform, you can define it to the constructor. And what is the point about the constructor is constructor executes automatically for every object. Constructor executes automatically for every object. Constructor will execute automatically for every object. So in JavaScript, that is the basic use of a constructor. If you want any particular functionality to perform while constructing, then you can give that to constructor. And usually constructor can be parameterized or parameterless. Constructor can be parameterized or parameterless. Constructor can be parameterized or parameterless. So if it is parameterized, then the values are passed at the time of allocating memory for class. If it is parameterized, then the values are passed at the time of allocating memory for class. So constructor can be parameterized or parameterless. So we can have parameterized or parameterless constructor. Parameterized, that means, for example, we are having a drop down. We have a select, we have an option select database. And we have option like Oracle. We have option like MySQL. We have option like MongoDB. So what we want is here, When user clicks on, when user selects a database and clicks on insert, I need to connect that database and do insert. That means now constructor have to do one more extra work. It should identify what is the connection and it should connect to that particular. How constructor can change according to situation. You know, any method or any function can be modified by using parameters. Already we discussed that. Parameters are used for modifying the functions. Now we can use parameterized constructor, that means DB name. And we will use connected to. Here I am using a binding expression. So connected to and DB name. That is the database name. Now, whenever you allocate memory, so actually this is class name. And why for a class name you are using parenthesis? Why you are using parenthesis for a class name? Usually this is the signature of a function, right? Now actually in JavaScript, this is not required because that represents constructor. That is not required if constructor is parameterless. If constructor is parameterless, you don't need to even mention this. In other programming languages, it is mandatory to mention. Actually, they are invoking constructor. After the class name, what does it means? They are invoking the function. You know, this is called as, we call this in JavaScript as IIFE. What is IIFE? Immediately invoke function expression. That means we are invoking the constructor actually. And generally in JavaScript, if constructor is parameterless, that means we don't have parameter. If constructor is parameterless, if don't have any parameter, then actually this is not required. You can simply make it like this. That means you can just put class name, database. That's it. You don't need to mention the parenthesis because internally the constructor is automatically called. Internally the constructor will be called. You don't need to mention that. You see here, it is still working same. It is same. You don't need to mention that. You don't need to mention this. You don't need to mention. That means when we need that, if constructor is expecting some parameter, DB name, and I want to use that parameter here, DB name, now it is mandatory to pass the value. How to pass the value? This is class name. In the class name, there is a constructor which is anonymous. Anonymous means we have to invoke by using parenthesis. Into that, you have to pass the name. I'm using document.query selector select.value. That means it will get the value of dropdown. That means here what I'm doing into the constructor document.query selector, we have dropdown.value. It is going to get the value. That means now what we are doing, we are selecting some database and update. It is connected to MySQL updated. We are selecting the database MongoDB insert connected to MongoDB insert. That means at the time of creating an object, if you want any functionality to perform, you can give that to construct. And if you want that functionality to change according to situation, then constructor can be parameters. Can we pass multiple parameters? Yes. Can we have REST parameters? Yes. All those concepts are same. It can have REST parameter, it can have multiple parameters, it can use spread approach. Everything is possible. So generally, if constructor is parameterized, that means class name, and we have a constructor and we have some parameter. If constructor is parameterized, then what we do is while creating an object at the time of allocating memory for that, we have to pass the value. The values are passed while allocating memory for that class. So that is one basic point about constructor. This is one example. Just I will copy this example. It is parameterized and parameterless and how to deal. We have some more rules about constructor that we will see now. For that we need to understand one more concept. So currently class members, we are having class members. So what are the class members? Summary for class members, we are having property, we are having accessor, we are having a method and a constructor. These are the members of class. So what is property? What is its role? It stores the data. Actions are defined by methods. Controlling read and write operations on property is done by accessor. And actions at the time of constructing object is defined by constructor. These are the basics of constructor in JavaScript. Now next important, generally JavaScript people learn about another concept in JavaScript related to class, that is code reusability and extensibility. Code reusability and extensibility. Another important here about classes. Code reusability and extensibility. So we can reuse the code and we can extend the code in two ways actually. Object-oriented programming supports two types of two techniques to handle reusability and extensibility. One is aggregation, another one is inheritance. Aggregation and inheritance. We have two types of techniques. Code reusability and code extensibility can be achieved by using two techniques. One is aggregation, another one inheritance. In general OOP languages, this is very common. Actually, what is necessity of reusability? One example I will show here again. What is code reusability and code extensibility? One example. Let's say, suppose we are having a class. I will write a script. We are having a class. I given some HDFC bank version 1. That is the class. Okay, in that we have personal. We have personal banking services. This is one property, and we have a print which will print that document.write. It is going to print this dot personal. It is going to print that personal banking services. That is the option. Now I want to add some new features to this app. That means this app is already installed and it is being used by users. Without disturbing that existing which people are using, we want to add one more feature. Then how? So the question here is, why don't you modify this class? Suppose you want a new feature. If you want a new feature, then why don't you directly add a new feature into this? Why don't you add a new feature directly into this? Usually people don't do that. What they do, they develop another version. In that version, they will add a new feature and they will ask to install that new version. Why to design a new version without modifying existing version? If anyone asks, why should I design a new version without modifying the existing version? What to achieve? What we can achieve by developing a new version without disturbing the existing version? Actually, it is required to handle two situations. One is, we generally do that for achieving backward compatibility and to achieve multi-versioning environment. Versioning environment. These are the two requirements. If anybody asks like, why should you build a new version? Why don't you modify the existing version? You want to add one feature, then modify the existing version. Why you are building a new version for that again? Generally, we do that for two reasons. One, backward compatibility, another one, multi-versioning. What is backward compatibility? Backward compatibility means even a higher version is available, developers can still use the all the old features will work in new version. That means they may be using new version, but without using the new features, they can just use their old features as it is. This mechanism is called as what? Backward compatibility. Suppose you are using Windows. Your latest Windows version is Windows 11. Now you ask, you are using still Windows 8 or 10. If anyone asks like, why you are using Windows 10, why don't you update to 11? Then you can ask them, why should I update? They will tell you that there are some new features which you can use. Then you will say that I don't want those new features. I don't want those new features. If I don't want the new features, why should I install them? Because to get those new features, we need more memory, or we need more concepts that required to update into my device. And I don't have that much memory, then I will not use your new version. I will still use your old. That means even there is a new version, users will be using the older version. And that is called as multi-versioning environment. Multi-versioning environment means in one device, both versions also can work. For example, you are watching some Gmail. You are using some Gmail. Suddenly, while using Gmail, internet connection slow down. Generally, in Gmail, how to attach a file? In Gmail or Google Drive, how to attach a file? You can drag and drop, file will be attached, or you can click browse button, select the file, upload the file. Which one is easy? Why they have given technique? Drag drop is enough now. Why they have given browse, select, attach if drag drop is easy? Tell me. Drag drop is easy. Then why they have given another option also? Browse, select. Because drag drop is a new feature, and to use that feature you need a little high connection speed. If your device is not having connection speed high, it is slow, then you will fail in drag drop. Then it will say that, okay, you don't need to stop your work. Still you can upload, but you cannot drag drop. You can use a browse select. That means two versions of same concept is working. That is called multi-version. What is advantage of that? At any situation, the option should be available. So actually in latest operating system, multi-versioning is supported. Earlier, we don't have that. For example, do you know, suppose you are using Windows operating system, you installed MS Office 2013. After that, you install MS Office 2017. Earlier, what it used to do is overwrite old and add the new. But do you know now your Windows can have both versions? You can have 2013, you can have 2017, both. You can use any one, older one or a new. Allowing two versions of same software run on a server or a device. This mechanism is called as what? Multi-version. Why you need multi-versioning? Because to handle different situations. So without disturbing how you can add new feature, we can do one thing. We can create a class HDFC Bank version 2. In this we have some NRI and NRI banking services. We are having this. In this we have a print method which is going to print that. That means this dot what? NRI. But remember, this NRI banking services is in addition to existing. That means already in version 1, what they have, we should be able to use them in version 2 also. Now, how to access the contents of version 1 in version 2? How you can access without rewriting them? You can do that by using two techniques. One is what? Aggregation. What is aggregation? Aggregation is nothing but it is a technique accessing members of one class in another without configuring any relationship between classes. It is a technique of accessing members of one class in another class without configuring any relation between classes. It is referred as object to object communication. Object to object communication. It is known as has a relation. We usually call it as has a relation. In OOP languages, we call this as a relation. Aggregation is a technique of accessing members of one class in another class without configuring any relation between classes. Without defining any relation between the classes, we can access the members of one class in another. Why we don't want any relation between classes? If we configure relation between classes, then you will have a problem of overriding or writing. That means same name methods, same name members, then overriding, hiding methods. These problems will come. To overcome that, what we can do, we can use aggregation. Aggregation means without any relation between classes, we can access the members of one class in another. It is nothing but it is a simple technique. So what we do? So for example, we are having similarly another class Suppose we are having another class version 3. In version 3, we are having some loans, and here we are having some housing loans, personal loans like this. This dot loans. Now, what I want is, I want the version 1 details to access in version 2 without maintaining any relation between them. We don't want to connect them. We want to use one in another. Then what we can do, in the second version, we can create an object for first version. And through that object, we can access the members of first version. That means without maintaining any relation, we can access the members of one class in another class by using an instance of that particular class. This is called as aggregation. How version 3 can access version 2? That means we can create an object of which one? Version 2. And through that, we can access the print, which will access the version 2. Version 2 will access version 1. But all three classes are independent. There is no relation between them. All the classes are independent. There is no relation between them. So what we are doing here, so we will put a simple option like this, drop down. We will put an option like select version. And we are giving an option like this is version 1. Version 1. So this is 2022. Just like this. And it will have a value called VR1. And version 2, version 3. This is version 2, this is 23. And version 3, this is latest, something latest. And this is version 2 and version 3. And we have a button install. Now what we need to do, on click. So we have install click. On install click, what we are doing here is function install click. On install click, we will get the version document query selector drop down value. And we will write a switch into that if version is matching with case VR1 version 1. We will create an object for HDFC version 1, and through that object we can access the print and break. If the case is version 2, then we will create an object for this is obj1, object 1, and this is object 2 for HDFC version 2. And object 2, we will access the print and break. And if it is case version 3, VR3, and we will create an object 3 for HDFC version 3. And through obj3, we will access the print and we will break. And if it is default, then we will put a message. So please select a version. We can add additionally, like before printing, document.write a heading version 1 install. And the same I'm giving here version 2 install and version 3 install. That's what we are defining is install. Now, what is the concept here is when user selects a version and install, it will install only that version related feature. And user selects the second version, it will get both 1 and 2 features. And when user selects the third one, it will get all the 3 features. That means even the latest version is available, user can choose a older version to install. This is called backward compatible. In higher version, you can use older features also. That means in older version, you cannot use highest features, but in a higher version, we can still use features. old techniques, old features will work as it is. That is called backward compatible. Here, what is the concept? Without maintaining any relation between classes, we can access the members of one class in another. This mechanism is called as aggregation. We call this as aggregation. This is an example for aggregation actually. That is aggregation. We have another technique. What is another technique is without aggregation, you can access by using inheritance. Inheritance. It is the process of configuring a relation between classes. In order to access members of one class in another. Existing class is known as superclass. So extended class is known as derived class. It is known as derived class. So accessing with relation is known as is often called as accessing with relation is often called as is a relation. We call it as is a relation. We have has a relation and is a relation. Aggregation is has a relation and inheritance is a relation. That means a class super and a class derived. This derived class can extend superclass. So derived class can access superclass methods by using members by using super keyword. You can use super keyword. Derived class can access superclass members by using keyword. That means without an instance you can access. This time we configure relation between classes, but what is threat in relation is so overriding, hiding of members can happen. That is the threat in the relation. That is the reason every time we don't use inheritance, we use aggregation also. What is the concept of derived? So we have derived and super. Just same example we can replicate. The same example we can replicate here. What we will do here, we will delete these objects in the version 2, this object in version 3. That means now what will happen? So when you select any second version, only second version feature will come. And you selected third version, only third version feature will come. Now what we do, instead of aggregation, we use technique. Version 2 extends HDFC version 1. Then what you can do is, in the print, we can simply access super.print, which will access the superclass members. And version 3 extends what? Extends HDFC version 2. And you can access super.print. That's it. This is relation between classes. That means now the version 2 have a relation with version 1. That's the reason without any object we can access members of superclass in derived by using super keyword. That means same functionality works now. This time we are reusing with configuring relationship. I selected version 3, it will get all the features. I selected version 1, it will get only that feature. And version 2, it is going to get these features. So, relationship between the classes and without any relation between the classes. This is called as what? Inheritance. So, reusability and extensibility can be achieved in two ways. What is it? Aggregation, another one, inheritance. And now the point is, I hope you learned inheritance rule. What is inheritance rule? The basic inheritance rule, without following that rule, inheritance will fail. The basic inheritance rule is when you inherit a superclass and use in a derived class constructor must call superclass constructor. That is the rule. In every OOP language, inheritance rule is a superclass constructor must be called first, then followed by derived class. Java, C++, and .NET languages, all they do this internally, but JavaScript cannot. That is the reason inheritance will fail in JavaScript if you don't follow this rule. We have to explicitly follow. Generally in Java, C++, C# like OOP languages, when you create an object for a derived class, it will call which class constructor first? Base class. After that, derived. Any derived class object will call base class constructor first, then followed by derived. In JavaScript, it will not. Then inheritance will fail. That is the inheritance rule actually. So, what is the rule about inheritance in JavaScript you have to follow? So, inheritance rule for constructor in JavaScript is to access and call superclass constructor in derived class. Superclass constructor in derived class. Inheritance rule for constructor in JavaScript is to access and call superclass constructor in derived class. Otherwise, inheritance will fail. If superclass is having a constructor and derived class also having a constructor, it is mandatory that derived class must call superclass. In other languages, it is not necessary because it internally happens. In JavaScript, it is explicitly required. It is mandatory. Otherwise, inheritance will fail. For example, I will show you here. This is inheritance example, right? Yeah, this is inheritance example. So here you see the basic rule of inheritance. That means the basic rule of inheritance, we have class super and it have a constructor and it is document.write. This is super class constructor. And we have a class called derive and extends which one? Super. Now we have a constructor. This constructor belongs to derived class. We have derived class constructor. We have two constructors, one the superclass constructor and derived. Now we will create an object for derived class. Then actually as per the rules of this derived class first call constructor of super, then followed by derived. In general, other languages it will happen, but here it will fail. That means you see that when I run this, so this will show like this, but when I open the inspect and go to the console, you have a failure. And what is the failure? You must call super constructor in derived class. That means inheritance fail. What is the rule of constructors here is The derived constructor must call super constructor. How? By using super keyword. By using super. Now inheritance will pass. Otherwise it will fail. Now inheritance will pass. This rule, if you don't remember in JavaScript, every time inheritance fails. That means in other languages, what is the point? This is internally happening. But in JavaScript, you have to manually define. What is the basic inheritance rule? Derived class constructor is called after the superclass constructor. First super, then derived. If superclass constructor is not called in derived constructor, inheritance will fail. In JavaScript, we have to explicitly do this. And in React, especially every time. Why? Because in React, when you create a class component, it always inherits a component. When it inherits a component and you don't follow this rule, it will fail. That's very basic rule you need to follow every time. So this is the concept of constructor. That means this is the inheritance rule. What is the inheritance rule? A derived class constructor must call superclass constructor. This is about classes, inheritance and all. Actually, in JavaScript, one more thing about class is we have to understand one more concept is about polymorphism. Polymorphism. Polymorphism, how it is going to work. That we'll see in next session. Tomorrow we'll do that. Tomorrow we will finish this polymorphism and tomorrow we are going to start using React and classes. Classes in React.js we will do now. How to create components and what is difference. With class components, what is difference we will understand. That we'll see in next session. Tomorrow we'll continue. Okay, right.